morning, Volker. We are very happy to have you here on our chat. And here we are talking about the HR Circle, gathering the information about all things HR strategy and HR practice. Yeah. And if you're the first time here, and you're probably the first time because we are just starting this kind of chats with our base, please subscribe. And now I would like to introduce you to Volker, who's our first guest. We're very excited to have him, given his experience. May I ask you to introduce yourself, Volker?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Chiara. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to contribute to this, I think, very interesting format of exchanging ideas and thoughts about the HR space and everything around it. My professional past is full of HR transformation consultancy. Then I did a lot of digital HR research. And from that, I set up my company, TI People. It's an employee experience company. So we help large organizations provide better experiences to people at work. And we do that based on data that we collect. So we have a huge database full of experience qualities of people that go to work. So millions of data sets in it. And with that data, we're trying to understand what the trends in employee experience are and how to best help companies focus on the most important pieces of it.
You know, I love two things about your background. On one side, how the interaction with customers and HR transformation has immediately made evident, and you were really a forerunner in the experience world, and has made evident the fact that experience is a critical factor in the HR world and in HR transformation. And I love how your approach that is at the same time factual and predictive based on data. How would you define the concept of employee experience?
Yeah, good question. And I'm born German, so definitions is a good thing to start with. Our way of defining employee experience is the employee experience is the human experience of work, and it is represented by, and here we go, the perceived quality of interactions at work. So it's the sum of all interactions at work and how these interactions are perceived by the individual. So that's the thing that is interesting about employee experience, because people that go to work have so many interactions, right? So compare it to customer experience. The sum of interactions that you have as a customer, even if you're buying a complex B2B good, is very limited to some moments and some touch points. Whereas if you go to work and if you're working for a company for, let's say, 8 years, you will have hundreds of thousands of interactions. So this ecosystem of employee experiences is so much more complex than the ecosystem of customer experiences that makes it really, really hard to manage it, because there's a jungle of experiences and you have to cut through that jungle to see the few experiences that for a company are good to go after and they yield the highest returns and so forth. So first and foremost, from this definition of employee experience, what comes out of it is you have a big prioritization problem. And that is also reflected in what we read about employee experience, because it can be anything. And it's correct, right? So if all interactions and the perceived quality of interactions is what makes the employee experience, then it can be anything. Yet the problem is, what is the core? What is the most important piece to go after? And that is what we think you can only do and understand if you have data. That's that's the link of the definition. I think the definition is broadly shared. Experienced designers would say the same thing, and customer experience expert would say the same thing. So the definition is broadly shared. I think what that means for HR is this huge problem of focus and prioritization. Sorry, a lengthy answer.
No. I think that's an important answer, both, well, for me to understand the better, but also for, I hope, for our listeners, because it's a very confused world, and experience is not just about everything. It's also what is actionable, what can be measured, because otherwise we cannot act on something we don't know. We need to measure something to know and understand it. And in the end, what is relevant for one company has to be filtered through the company culture, the company way of working, and in the end, the relationship that they have with their own employees. It's very specific to a corporation, and not standardized cookie cutter. If I come in a company and I try to apply an experience approach that has been designed for someone else, that will not work.
Yeah, and it's even worse, Chiara. So not only will it not work to copy it from one company to another, it's even worse because employee experience is a human-centered thing. So as said, it is the quality of interactions as perceived by the individual. So if you are a very orthodox thinker in employee experience, you would say you have to design an experience for a single individual and understand the individual's context of the interaction and all the rest of that. That, of course, is overdoing it, because in large companies we have to be able to do that at scale. So therefore, this question of how much of a one-fits-all standardized process approach is possible in providing better experience, I totally agree, not possible. So we have to think the experience from the perspective, from the lens of the individual person. And that means we have to, and that's a big cultural shift. Like all our HR transformation folks are thinking a lot in processes and policies. Now, what we have to understand is processes and policies create experiences, of course, but they are not the experience. So the experience design doesn't mean process redesign. It is, we have to first understand here's the thing. We have to first understand which experiences are there at all, right? So first we have to have a model in place by which we can cut the whole jungle of experiences into slices and dices that we can understand and then measure and then manage and then improve. And the concept that's used for that is cutting the experiences down into moments in which experiences happen. These moments are setting the context. So, and the second dimension of an experience is the touch point. So through what is something experienced? And a touch point could be a manager one-on-one, right? So that could be a touch point. Now, what's important is, in which context does this manager one-on-one happen? It could be, it's my first day after parental leave, and I come back to the office and I have my manager one-on-one. That is a very different context to I'm having an informal chat with my manager at the coffee machine, or I'm having an annual performance review with my manager. So we need to understand the context and the touch point, and that is the first way of understanding it. And then the process thinking, so the thinking of what does a company want to do or can create at scale or can automate with IT systems, that is then, I would say, only a backstage exercise of creating experiences. But the front stage is really the perception of the individual in context at touch point.
Which makes completely sense, because again, we're talking about people and human experience. So we need to start with the person. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering from a, how to say, production point of view, and I'm Italian, so I speak with my hands.
Like that.
And I'm wondering, where would you suggest we start from? Because I imagine somewhere, if I have a meeting with my 3 mates and we are charged to design an approach to experience for my company XYZ, I need to start from something. I need to have the first grabbing piece. And I'm wondering what you would suggest our
Perfect. It's a perfect question, and it's exactly the right question to ask, because as said, HR folks are overwhelmed with this employee experience thing. It's just such a huge beast, and taming that beast, as I said, requires data. So what I would suggest is a simple approach of think big, start small, iterate as you scale. So thinking big means we need one language for experiences. Everyone in the organization has to talk about experience in the same way, because otherwise we will never find enough cross-silo collaboration and shared accountability with business owners for creating better experiences. So we need to speak one language, therefore we need one framework. So we need to have a common understanding of, like, what are the journeys our employees go through? How do we cut these journeys down into moments that set different contexts? And within each moment, what are the touch points that we are interested in managing? So this system has to be defined. That is think big. You can buy a ready-made system. We've built one, so that's just, they are there. So it's not a lot of work, but that such a thing is needed for everyone to speak the same language. I call it the experience framework or experience data framework. It depends on how much on data you want to push. And then once that's there, then there are, the second thing is start small. So pick one experience and improve it. And this picking one is an interesting one. There's two general approaches to it. One is you listen to the highest paid opinion in the room, and what that person says is what you go after the first. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, if you really think in this human-centric way, you ask the employees where to start. So what you would do is you would do a baseline measurement of all the relevant experiences in a company, and you do that with a quick survey thing, and out comes, number one, which experiences are broken? So where do people say this experience is not good? And then number two, of those that are broken, identify the few that have a high impact on the overall experience of people. Those are the two dimensions we have to consider. We not only do we have to figure out which experiences are broken, we also have to know of those which have a high impact on the overall experience. So pick an experience that is broken and has a high impact on the overall experience of the people. And that is a good starting point for start small. So you pick one specific experience. It could be the experience of, I'm just building this as an example. It could be the experience of the frontline managers in our sales teams in South America. Why not? So we are creating a better experience for frontline managers of sales teams in a region, and we start there. The way of improving experiences is you typically use design thinking methods, so agile methods that involve the people directly. So you're not designing it to them or for them, but you do it with them, right? So that's the way of doing it. So you do some focus groups with these frontline managers in the sales department in South America. You improve their experience, and then you remeasure and see that things have improved. And ideally, you're able to also prove the business impact that has had. So customer experience goes up in South America. If once that happens, you will create a pull effect. Other people in the organization will see that example and will want the same thing because it's good for their business. And if that's the case, then HR has won, because HR has found shared accountability with business owners that want to create better experience for their people. That's the iterate as you scale part of the story. So think big, start small, iterate as you scale could be an approach to doing it.
That makes completely sense. It's to some extent it resonates to me, some of the approaches that we actually studied. And when I say we, it's previous companies and environments, not necessarily SIP as well, of course, for analytics, where the approach has been often the same. I know you're very familiar with approach to HR analytics and the concept of seeing how creating a set of analytics that can allow to make a difference, and starting with a small part of the company so you can eventually create a pull effect. And I love that example. I have a question, but I think that would be for another chat, and that's about how exactly how do you prototype when you talk about HR processes and design thinking? But I'm afraid that that will have to be for another chat,
Yeah,
because I'd love
probably.
to feed from you on your design thinking experience. But I think for everybody's best interest, we should cut it out now and start winding down. See if you have a few last words of advice for how we go ahead for HR experience and employee experience. I find it funny actually how I keep mixing up HR experience and employee experience, and in fact they should be aligned, because HR is people. But
yeah, I think that it's a maybe that's a good finishing thought. The experience that HR can directly create is only so impactful, right? So that we know from our data that HR can create meaningful experiences, but compared to all the other experiences at work, it's just a subset. Now, I totally understand that in some organizations, when they get started with employee experience management, that they start with the experience that HR create, in the sense of clean your own house first before you go and talk to other people and say what they should do. That makes sense. It's a logical, pragmatic approach, but we should never forget that the by far most impactful moment for people is when they perform their job. So it's not when they interact with HR. It's when they perform their job. And what if we as HR can over time establish a system in which people, it's easier for people to get their jobs done, that is having the highest impact on the whole thing.
That's a very powerful thought, because in many discussion I hear a lot of well, let's start with HR processes, but you're right, that would be just a start and just an inspiration. But the important part is how we all perform and deliver what we're paid for delivering in the end.
Exactly. Very good.
Thank you so much, Volker. It was always lovely talking to you, and I think it was a useful and factual discussion. I thank you so much for your time. And
thank you very much.
To everybody else, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.